You're listening to the RMPodcast, the official podcast of Red Moon Productions. Here are your hosts, Brandon Davidson, Keith Cheatham, and Sean Sebastian. Enjoy.
Episode of the Red Moon Podcast, live every single Tuesday night right here on all your favorite social media accounts. Got a great show planned for everyone out there. We're missing one of our hosts this week, but he's here in spirit. He will be here tonight to discuss the very big movie on the block, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. We reviewed it. I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Davidson, alongside our normal new host, Sean Sebastian. And while we're on your chair, hey Keith, you hearing us all right?
I can hear you.
He can hear us. No, we can hear you.
I can hear.
You sound
I
good.
can talk.
I mean, you don't sound that good, actually.
It's Nick Andros.
Yeah, Nick Andros.
That's right. He's he's dead. He blew up at a house.
Yeah.
For everybody who's seen The Stand.
Way to spoil it.
Everybody's like, "Oh God, who's Nick Andros?" I didn't read that headline.
Yeah, it's one of Keith's many alter egos. Now, Keith, share a little bit of your story as to why you're not here this evening. Why we've got your the Indians didn't take you, but we have your shirt draped over the chair, and you're obviously
Aliens took me? I didn't know that was a possibility.
Indians. The Indians.
Oh, Indians.
Native Americans.
Indians.
Come on.
Indigenous
they're not
people.
Indians anymore, you racist. They're the commanders.
That's true.
Oh yeah,
That's true. They are. I forgot about that.
No, I've been sick the last few days, and I'm phoning in this week.
He is.
So,
He's phoning in. He's a phony.
I'm actually feeling a bit better now, but yeah, I was a lot sicker than I normally get. So.
Are you feeling better because Tuesday is your favorite night of the week?
Yes. In fact, I felt absolutely horrible until this very moment. And the moment you called, it was like life re-entered.
It was your
me.
voice, Brandon.
It was
brought him back.
I think it was the Red Moon Productions intro music.
It is.
It was that beautiful
Yes,
music
I heard
hit.
it.
The soothing sounds of Jason Neer speaking the podcast intro. Oh, so it just gives me chills up my leg every time. Gosh. No, we do have a great show. Keith, you did write the review.
I did.
You were
read
feeling
it, though.
Yeah, you were feeling ill on you thankfully were able to make it to the movie, but afterward you were just like, I'm winded and can I just go home and rest and I'll send you the review later. And of course it's like, well, yeah, obviously, man. So we hope you feel better. Hope you're back next week.
Yeah. I've never been so like, I mean, I've had fluid like phlegm and stuff, but I've never been so sick where like I just felt like I couldn't breathe like I did the last 2 days.
Yeah, we came out of the
Yeah.
theater.
Wild.
And you were just like you were hanging out at the side of your truck, and you were just like, I have no breath.
I mean, honestly, I
thought he
mean,
was joking.
Yeah,
Like he said,
No.
he said like I was just like sick and had to get out of there, and I was like,
because that movie,
Seriously?
the movie just reeked. That's why. No, it's funny because obviously we went and saw the big one on the block this week, and it's been a while that we have had differing opinions on a movie, and this is a very interesting one because I think you two agree. I am the one that's the outlier here.
yeah,
as
your
far as our review.
microchip started acting up again.
That's right. And my microchip brain just happens to fall in line with what's correct. Okay.
"Oh, you're currently outnumbered."
Well, I had a BIOS update, and I'm just saying.
You had a BIOS update.
So that was a terrible joke. Terrible joke. All righty, guys. I think should we just get into the review? Should we just go ahead and roll it? Here is our review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. The following is a review by Keith Cheatham. Since you've been gone, a song whose lyrics perfectly sum up the state we find Peter Quill, aka Star-Lord, in at the beginning of Marvel's latest outing, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Still reeling from the loss of Gamora in Infinity War, and the return of Gamora from the past in Endgame. Quill longs to reunite with his lost love, though this Gamora is not the same one he once knew. However, Quill and Gamora's unrequited love story takes a back seat to the introduction of Rocket's backstory and the High Evolutionary. For many fans of the MCU, Since You've Been Gone is also an apt representation for the feelings towards Marvel's last and current phase. Gone is the depth and quality of the Infinity Saga. Now we have Doctor Strange with a clearly CGI third eye, orgies and buffoon Thor, a celestial sticking out of the earth no one seems to care about, and Kang, supposedly the next Thanos-level threat who can't even take down Ant-Man. With the MCU in such disarray, many fans place their hopes in the Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, the last outing for the team as we know it, and for James Gunn's tenure with Marvel, moving on to launch DC's new cinematic universe after wrapping his Guardians trilogy. With all of its major cast returning, though many announced this would be their final outing as their characters, Guardians 3, as mentioned earlier, sets out to dive into Rocket's backstory, and round out the Guardians' character arcs that began almost a decade ago in 2014's Guardians of the Galaxy. In this, it is mostly a success, and most critics and fans seem to agree that Volume 3 was a nice conclusion to what James Gunn began. That said, while Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 met my expectations, it certainly did not exceed them. And while it was, in my opinion, a fun blockbuster that thematically wrapped up these character stories, it does take some missteps and misses the mark on providing full emotional closure for the full cast. The biggest failure in this regard is Quill and Gamora's story. With Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana reprising their roles, the emotional journey both characters have been on, and Star-Lord's ultimate lesson in family and learning to no longer run from his past are all excellent plot points to explore, though none of this is actually explored in any depth, instead expressed solely through exposition delivered as pep talks and words of advice from friends. Gunn's decision to focus on Rocket's past and use it to introduce the High Evolutionary, while a good story, comes a little late in a series that is trying to wrap up arcs for at least 7 different characters. It's not the material involving Rocket's past that's bad or doesn't fit, but it does take away precious screen time from the other character arcs, especially Quill and Gamora's, whose arcs have been the crux of the series up until this point. Though they aren't the only two to suffer. Drax, whose role as a father seeking revenge for the loss of his family in the first 2 movies, has his entire wrap-up relegated to a few scenes at the end of the film, with no other mention of his arc until that point. And this is true for most of the Guardians. Again, it's not where Drax or any of the other characters ends up, or the point the film makes about them are entirely out of nowhere. It does indeed fit with what was established narratively before in prior films, but being the final movie, no other depth was given to these characters to help build towards their ending. They fit thematically, but it all feels tacked on by the film's end. The film also finally introduces Adam Warlock, a fan favorite for comic readers. He was teased in the after-credits scene of Guardians 2 6 years ago, but while comic fans have eagerly anticipated his introduction, it's safe to say the average moviegoer has completely forgotten all about the brief tease made 6 years ago. Now that he's finally here, his only real purpose is to fulfill the tease that he would finally be in a movie. The character could have been cut entirely from Volume 3, and it wouldn't have changed anything about the movie's plot. While Rocket's story is well told, with some decent emotional moments and disturbing imagery that helps paint the High Evolutionary as a credible villain, unlike many of Phase 4's baddies, it almost feels like it should have been its own movie. What the movie attempts to do with Rocket, bringing him to the forefront as a possible new face of the Guardians, isn't bad, and Rocket has always been a fan favorite. It also creates a clash in tone for the film. Quill has always been the affable buffoon who is actually clever when he wants to be. His love of 80s Earth music, which expands into more modern songs with the introduction of a Zune, set the Guardians' tone as something bizarre and comedic, but full of heart with relatable characters. Volume 3 tries to find a balance between Peter's story and Rocket's, bouncing from the bizarre and humorous to sometimes disturbing. While I liked both, I felt the unbalanced tone and sheer amount of content Gunn tried to tackle in one film ultimately left Quill's story without the emotional payoff he should have had, as the franchise did start with him, and never goes as dark as I felt Rocket's story should have either, as any time we really begin to feel the horrors inflicted by the High Evolutionary, the film cuts to some abstract humor or else jumps to the next scene in need of addressing the other Guardians. Ultimately, I enjoyed Volume 3 more than 2, but less than the first. It's definitely better than what Marvel has delivered so far in Phase 4 and 5. And I would even argue it's better than some of the Infinity Saga's lesser films. But I still feel the emotional payoff could have and should have been much more satisfying. I give Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 3 out of 4 stars.
3 out of 4 stars for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3.
So this is going to be an interesting discussion because I think I've downgraded my score.
Are you with us, Keith?
He should be. He's unmuted. I don't know.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
There he
All
is.
right. There he
Well,
is.
I know you were watching on a delay, but you were able to see the review. I mean, you wrote it, but obviously,
Yeah, I know the review.
I hope it did your work justice. Everything coming together. I mean, I wanted to clearly state that yes, I read it, but those are your words.
Oh, absolutely.
That was
'cause
not generated by AI.
No, not at all.
No.
That's other written pieces. We don't
Yeah.
pay our writers here. But yeah, let's do a deep dive. I don't know who wants to start the discussion. I know, Keith, you gave it our Red Moon official. You're still the seal of approval for Red Moon. You gave it 3 out of 4.
I did. I kind of we know me and Sean both like it. They got the 3 stars, so I kind of want to hear your thoughts because I want to dive into the discussion.
Okay.
I want to hear your score.
I settled on. I was going 2.5 when I walked out of the theater. I've definitely settled on 2. I'm not gonna completely just ridicule it. I mean, no, I am. I'm going to tear it apart pretty much. I still settled on 2 ultimately because I can see why there's some people who may enjoy it from Marvel fans. I definitely did agree for the most part with a lot of people's takes in that. Overall, I think it's one of the better films that Marvel has put out in a while since No Way Home, but that's not saying a lot.
Yeah.
Because we've reviewed and we've been very harsh and critical of Marvel on this show throughout Phase 4 and, of course, this beginning of Phase 5. But I really am just upset with the fact that for James Gunn to have originally be ousted of this project and then brought back squarely to kind of put the bow on his series and these beloved characters that he apparently that he says that he absolutely adored. I mean, granted, look, I'm glad he was able to, but after seeing this, I really felt like maybe he just didn't really understand even the world he was creating, or maybe it's been so far removed, or he's so knee deep now into the DC universe. Even though this was created long before I think DC was ever in the picture. It still is one of those things that ultimately I just felt like the movie was bloated, the editing was sloppy. The characters' motivations were very contrived. Some of the plot points were very much a Deus Ex Machina. They just felt like they were added to get us to the next plot point. There were several different. I've got the reason this has kind of become a little bit more clear for me is I have a coworker, a friend at work that he told me after he saw it, he didn't give me any inclination of how he felt. He just said, "Hey, let me know when you see it and tell me what you think." So I was like, "Okay, cool." And I just simply wrote back to him, and I'll read his full comments here after we do a little bit more discussing. But he absolutely hated the film. Josh, the guy at work, Josh Bullis, I'm name dropping you, bud. You said I had your permission. He absolutely hated it. I think he gave it a 0.5 star, but I'll read you his comments in a little bit.
Okay.
He
Actually
just thought it was.
I don't know. I
atrocious.
kind of like to know what he has to say because I mean, there's some things you mentioned that I just didn't get from the film, like some of like their motivations being weak. I'm kind of curious about which motive. Like, there's just certain things that I didn't get, so I just kind of. And if his letter made that clear to you, I'd kind of like to hear it, just so.
Okay.
I would, just so I know, like
real quick,
examples
Sean,
of stuff.
Let's hear where you.
Yeah, I want to
landed.
hear Sean first.
No,
Yeah.
I agreed with the 3 stars. I think one of the many different reviews that I've kind of watched since I have seen the film, because I like to hear other people's opinions too, especially those who are popular on social media and stuff like that. If they've got tens and hundreds of thousands of viewers, then I kind of take their opinion to mean a little bit. And the drunken, what's that guy's name? The dude that does the
Drunken Reviews.
Yeah.
Oh man,
He's great.
so like he said it best. He said the movie is the best of the worst, and he basically said the same thing that Brandon had said. Since No Way Home, this is the best that Marvel has been able to come up with since that film. I 100% agree with that. Everything else that they've come up with has been pretty much garbage, and I thought this movie was much more enjoyable and much more in tune with the roots of the other two films. So I enjoyed that aspect of it, but there's definitely plot issues, and there's definitely things that I would have rather happened. Now, I'm not a filmmaker. I'm not writing this, so I can't sit there and say I could have done it better. I actually wished Rocket would have died.
Same.
I thought the motivation for the end would have been stronger.
Him or Star-Lord.
Yeah.
And I know they weren't going to kill Star-Lord.
Yeah, I didn't think they would do him. But the thing with Rocket and him being kind of on the deathbed, and the moment that Gamora kind of tells Peter, like, you've got to let him go, I felt like that was also her saying, you got to let the thought of Gamora go because I'm not her. And I felt like it had that dual meaning, and to me it would have been better if he would have went ahead and passed and been at peace, especially with everything that you find out he's been through in his life. I thought Rocket would just be better off no longer an experiment, but with his friends, and we can get into that part. We can get into that part later because I know that's something that Brandon didn't like.
No,
but yeah, I mean,
it went down the avenue of what I've come to expect from James Gunn, which is he marries what I used to like about his work was that he would marry some of the bizarre and odd creature developments or the oddities of his own brain that he could concoct, and he would marry that well with something rooted in reality and make it approachable and add some human nature elements to it that would make you feel and
even emotion, like
yes,
he would merge. He could merge the silly with emotion. But there were times in this where the emotion didn't get to sink in because he immediately cuts to like the scene of the walrus waving, and it's like, well, now you ruined the emotion with something that's
something goofy,
very abstractly goofy.
Oh yeah, the part where the animals are in the cages and they're laying on their back talking about their names and talking and talking about what they're gonna do if they get out and all of that. That moment almost had me in tears. Because emotionally it hit. But then you're right, though. Immediately after that, I think the rabbit or the walrus, one of the two, says something stupid. It's not funny. And it just kind of took me out of that moment where a tear was about to fall, because I'm like, not only, I mean, yeah, they're animals, but they're, Rocket Raccoon is one of our favorite characters. He's an animal, yes, but he's still one of the Avengers. I mean, he's still one of the Guardians of the Galaxy. Like, the other animals in the movie are just as important and just as living and soulful as he is. So I felt like I couldn't, disregard that fact. So yeah, the emotional part hit me, but then he takes me out of it with a bad joke, and then immediately and this is where Brandon got it right up on the editing part. It immediately jumped to this action scene with Peter Quill dodging shots and doing all this stuff, and I'm like, well, that was not like a slow transition at all. That was really jarring. You expect me to go from this moment of almost being ready to cry over this, and now I'm supposed to jump back into this action scene that's taking place on another world,
right?
And that ruined it for me. So it's all the emotional beats I felt like were kind of let down and ruined by the next scene.
Yeah,
which is just
and even the major. Oh, go ahead, Keith.
I was just going to say, the thing that I think bothered me most about the movie, like, I liked the backstory with Rocket. I liked what they did and some of that. But it really bothers me that for this to be the finale, it didn't really feel like a finale until the very end when they tacked on all of their endings. That was the thing, is they didn't really build they didn't focus on Quill and Gamora's relationship as much as I think they should have, seeing as Quill was the central character from the very beginning.
Yeah.
They didn't, even though all of their endings, I think, fit thematically. I said that in the review. Where they end up, I think, carries from the first two movies, certainly. But it's not until the very last few minutes of the movie that they're like, oh, by the way, this is your ending, this is your ending, this is your ending.
Yeah. By the way,
movie.
these characters have a happy ending too.
Right.
Yeah,
But-
it was like...
But it doesn't build throughout the movie that this is
Yeah.
where they're going to end up.
Well, and honestly, one of my harshest criticisms in the editing was what they did with Rocket's story. I felt like it felt, to me, for a movie, I mean, for what we've come to expect from the caliber of Marvel, and granted, like I said, we've been very critical of the last, two phases.
Very, yeah.
It still surprised me being of James Gunn, and honestly, if we're supposed to look forward to DC, this just didn't give me any hope. But I'm sitting here thinking there could have been more interesting ways in which they weaved in Rocket's story. And I know you all were saying, like, well, if he's on the table and he's hooked up to the med machine and he's
kind of like his life flashing before his eyes.
Before his eyes.
Yeah.
But I just felt like that felt very 90s cheesy. I just thought there would be a better way of weaving it in, whether it would be a perfect example that, I don't know, just popped into my head was there's an episode of Firefly right in the middle of the season where you just see the episode start out where the ship is badly damaged, everybody's injured, everybody's hurting, and the whole story leading up to the end of not knowing if they're going to make it is vignettes of how they all came to be on this ship.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a nice way to tie in these characters who never knew each other and came together and weave a story of how this central, focus of a group effort. And it's funny because, yeah, like you all said, the way they end the film with Rocket being supposedly the character that has brought them all together, and we're like, clearly, like, no, it doesn't start out that way. It's very much on Quill, and even you mentioned in the review, Keith, that it's like, yeah, there's this dichotomy of them struggling between which story are we focusing on now.
Yeah.
And it's like, for me, they could have nicely woven in even some backstory elements of not just being about Rocket and these people that were just being introduced in this film and being worked on, and kind of going for me, it's not that I wasn't emotionally connected to these animals being worked on in these horrific ways. Look, I'm all for, not treating an animal with being cruel to an animal. Absolutely not. But I just couldn't work up the emotional state of, I don't know these characters. You're now introducing them and you're trying to make me feel bad for not caring for them because it's a cute, cuddly animal. And look at these horrible experiments they're doing on them.
Yeah.
Like, that's a cheap trick. Don't do that. Don't try to work up the emotion in me by doing that in a cheap way. To me, that lessens the effect. And you're just trying to do a gut punch on, well, you better not say anything bad because now you're just a terrible person for not feeling bad about these animals being, experimented on.
Yeah.
And to me, they just could have done such a better job in weaving in maybe threads and coming up with story elements of how Rocket maybe was a crucial member that brought these characters together in certain elements of backstory that we didn't know took place that really held the group together and was a central element.
I would just
go ahead,
add real quick to that. I would say, honestly, the backstory of Rocket, I wish they would have just opened with all of that. Even though, I mean, if you pieced all of that together, it probably would have been about 20 minutes. If they would have gave us a 15 to 20 minute opening of the film that was just Rocket as a baby raccoon and him being experimented on, and he meets these friends and he gets them killed.
Yeah.
And then you open to the Guardians of the Galaxy and
being where they're at.
Right. I would have been more okay with the backstory happening at the beginning and then giving us, the rest of the film. I don't feel like you're absolutely right. Like, some of those backstory scenes don't really add any emotional flavor to those additional characters. I think they add to Rocket, and they make you see where he came from and exactly what it is that he's been, what's been tormenting him his whole life.
Right.
And I like that in it. But, if these are characters that aren't really supposed to be main characters in the movie, then just give us the little backstory at the beginning and then open us up into the film with, them in present day and him getting hurt and on death's door and them having to save him.
Right.
I would have much more appreciated that, and I think then you can it's kind of like, well, that was emotional. Let's get that out of the way at the beginning, and then let's focus on the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I mean, that's actually Man of Steel. I thought was similar to that effect, where they kept doing his background and it was all jumbled in the way it was presented, and if they had just done it at the very beginning, it would have fit. And I feel like, I agree with that with this film as well, that I could see if maybe you had a bit of a prologue, and then you could have spent the rest of the movie focusing on building towards each of the Guardians ending, rather than having to tack that on at the end because you spent the whole movie focusing only on Rocket.
Yeah,
Right.
Well, another thing he does in this movie that I did not appreciate, and again, this is what some of the things that knocked off the 4th star for me, is definitely with the other Guardians movies, Gunn made sure that his characters, yes, they were a part of the bigger story in the Infinity Saga, but you could see the Guardians 1 and 2, and there were connections to the other films. There were connections to the saga, but they were their own films, and I don't feel like they relied as much on the other films. But when you talk about, yes, you get a huge backstory for Rocket in this movie, you get a huge backstory for Peter Quill in Guardians Volume 2, you get a huge backstory of Gamora in Infinity War. And so some of the characters, their backstories are given in other Marvel films, whereas I feel like, Groot and Drax, their backstories are both kind of left out.
Groot's more of a focus, I guess, in 2, and you kind of get one for Nebula in Endgame.
A little bit, but it seemed like, their backstories are pulled from other movies. So basically, James Gunn's expecting you to have seen all of the Infinity Saga to know the backstory of these other characters, and he chooses this movie to focus only on Rocket.
I was going to say, at this point, that's kind of the MCU as a whole. It's if you haven't seen, just like we were talking about with the Christmas special, there's nothing major, but just like Cosmo kind of being introduced as a character in the Christmas special.
Or Mantis being his sister, Peter Quill's sister. You find that out in the special. It's like you would never know that without seeing it.
It was funny because pulling up clips for the review, I actually found one that were scenes from the special, and they were showing them giving them gifts at the end, and it was funny because as I was watching it, I was like, when did this happen? I was like, oh, this is the Christmas. It's like, I totally missed this. I didn't watch it. And it's funny because I'm going to read Josh's comments here, and I'm going to read them verbatim, but I know from what he told me back then when the Christmas special came out, he was actually very happy with it. He enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it, yeah.
So I know he's a fan, and he was really looking forward to this one. I'll bleep out some of the language, but he's only got a few ones. But so he responded after I told him that I thought it was
think
okay.
for posterity, you should read it as is.
As verbatim. Well,
unless there's an F-bomb.
There's some F-bombs.
Okay.
Just a couple. So we try to keep it a little PG-13.
We got it. We can't.
Which there was an F-bomb in this movie.
That's another issue I have with the movie. This is the first Marvel movie with the F word in it, other than Deadpool and Logan. And it's going to be one that I'm either not going to be able to show my kids now, or I'm going to have to pause it or mute it or whatever. And I hate doing that stuff. If you're going to make a PG-13 movie, I know you're allowed the 1 or 2 F-bombs,
right,
but come on.
We know
your
Disney
audience.
And we know it's Marvel.
Right, you know your freaking audience is middle school and high school kids and young adults. Don't put the freaking F-bomb in it.
I kind of thought the
that
same.
pissed me off. Go ahead.
The scene was...
No. Go ahead, Keith.
No.
I was just gonna say the scene was funny, but I agree. Like I thought the whole movie, like with some of the more disturbing imagery and then the F-bomb, I was like, this would be a very hard movie.
It's a dark movie
to show children.
Yeah.
And granted, I know, there's mature themes in a lot of the Marvel movies, but all of them so far are still accessible to kids.
It was that
and
first,
this is the first one.
Yeah, the first type of Marvel movie that I saw that I was like, I don't really know. I mean, I get it. It's kind of like, you could even argue with Harry Potter, the books, and saying like how they gravitated towards heavier themes and darker,
but they're still accessible to all ages.
Right. And it's like, and there, as the kids get older, and you could argue this with people who are fans of Marvel, but the idea and what's attractive about Marvel and the universe that they've built is that it's supposed to be that it now is such a cultural event that new groups of people, especially kids, younger and especially tweens, can now go back and revisit some of the older films, jump in, and then go see these newer ones. And I I just think, yeah, I agree. It's like they're toting that line, but they've never gone to that extent.
Yeah.
And I think that's James Gunn's creativity and Disney giving him free reign. And honestly, that's where I think there's a little bit of a problem here. But he also knew, hey, this is my last outing at Marvel. Who cares?
It was funny, but it's like it wasn't necessary.
Exactly.
It wasn't.
I think
like,
they wanted to prove, because a lot of people have been nervous about, like, oh, is Deadpool 3 going to be rated R, which they already confirmed it would be. I think it was Marvel wanting to prove
it with
they
Deadpool
wanted-
3.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
I know
I
it's
agree,
rated R.
yeah.
I'm not going to let my kids see that.
Right.
But it's just like you go through the entire Infinity Saga and freaking Captain America doesn't cuss. And then in Endgame, when they find out where Thanos is and he says, let's go get this son of a bitch.
It's
because
powerful,
he
which
says
the
it,
worst,
you
yeah.
know that he means business. And this
Right.
is serious. And that's what makes the cuss word in the scene. It makes the scene.
Yes.
You don't want anything other than son of a bitch in that.
And it's funny,
it's like,
but and you're describing something too where it's an empowering moment where it's like, okay, this is coming from somebody where they're very clear cut, not trying.
Right.
They keep it PG rated, but yet in this instance it was
open the
literally
effing door.
It
Like,
was used as
that's
a
it.
joke.
Yeah, exactly.
And it was a cheap line that you knew it was getting for a laugh, and that was kind of honestly us describing that scene in general is my overall feeling of the film. It just felt like a lot of cheap tricks to get you engaged and to keep you in this world of the last adventure of these heroes together. Yeah. And it felt cheap from the action scenes to the special effects or to the jokes. And ultimately, I will say there was only one fight scene in the whole movie that I thought was good, and it was the hallway scene that I thought was a great set piece.
Oh, yeah.
And it was
Yeah,
literally
that was-
like 5 minutes, and then that was it.
slow-mo, that was tight. Yeah.
But all right, I'm going to read verbatim.
Yeah. Sorry.
This is from Josh, who wrote, and I'll just read everything. He said, I hated every second of it. Absolute garbage. Seriously, the way they did Adam Warlock was just offensive. He's got a lot, by the way, so I'm just going to read through everything. He said, and the 5 or 6 scenes at the beginning with some of the laziest exposition of dialogue I've ever heard, just one character showing up and explaining who a second character is to himself, and then that character explaining back who he is, and then the first one explaining what their mission is just one of the is the other character that you didn't know. And then 4 more scenes exactly like that, all in a row. Laziest writing ever, and laughably bad editing. Obviously, lazy breaks in continuity, disgusting and horrifying visuals that were out of tone for the franchise, a complete change of Nebula and Gamora's characters. Also, why did we even have to see Gamora pooping? So that's a half star for me. And then he went on to say, also, what the is not, it's not the hands, it's the hands that guide the hands supposed to mean. There are the hands and the hands that made us, and there are the hands that guide the hands. Bullshit. Dog shit. This movie sucks. I don't understand how people are liking it so much or how anybody could take their kids to see it. I liked the one joke Drax had about killing one sad guy, and that joke was in the trailer. I think that's the only thing I liked. It's a big drop-off in quality, like The Dark Knight Rises, only this was much worse. Or X-Men The Last Stand, or Spider-Man 3, only this was worse. I think Rise of Skywalker was a worse movie? Barely. But the franchise was already crap before the movie came out, and this one was more disappointing personally. When the movie ended, I turned to my wife and I said, I think this is how I would feel if someone I cared about told me to kill myself.
Good gosh.
I've lost
Dang.
all my enthusiasm for James Gunn's DC future and any I had for future Marvel projects. I know you weren't into that, or this is where he's commenting on conversations we've had.
Yeah.
I know you weren't that into Marvel already at this point, and I agreed they had mostly been duds recently, but I was really holding out hope for this one. And honestly, it just makes me feel stupid for hoping it would be different than the others. And then he wrote back again. I mean, he was going on, and I loved every bit of this. Another huge issue with the movie is the med packs. The existence of the med packs makes any peril from any of the previous movies mean nothing.
Agreed.
Because every time anybody got hurt, they could have just used the med pack and magically gotten better. It's a narrative-breakingly egregious case of plot armor. And so when the med pack doesn't work on Rocket, it doesn't feel dramatic or tense. It feels like the writer winking at the audience and telling us that people are only going to get hurt when it's convenient to the plot. It removes any meaning to any of the struggle and desperation any of the characters go through and makes it that much more distasteful that we cut to many, many scenes of horrific animal torture. The blindingly obvious plot armor is also seen in the fact that when multiple Guardians face up against the same villains, only Nebula ever gets her neck snapped and her arms and legs broken because only she has the power to pop them back into place and keep going. The only time any of the other Guardians break a limb is when Mantis breaks her arm at the beginning, when they conveniently have a stack of med packs handy and can immediately make it a non-issue. Also, it gets worse with how the plot armor is so lazy. If you're paying attention to how they use the med packs, you'll notice that they have to turn the med pack on with a button before it will do anything. And the whole MacGuffin of the movie is a code that will allow them to use a med pack on Rocket, but in the emotional cinematic or climactic scene, when they put the code and when they put the code in and Gamora puts the med pack on his chest, she never turns it on. She just lays it on his chest, and for a second, and nobody ever hints the button to turn it on. And then they take it off, and he's good. Did nobody in production notice that? Did nobody think to just CGI a hand hitting a button or even CGI the machine turning on? It's so lazy. The most prevalent tone of the movie is that it's lazy and nobody cared when they made it. I think it's insulting to people who were invested in these characters and their stories. Also, to end with a Pixar Shrek-style dance scene with Florence and the effing machine, how did nobody come up with the idea and actually think it was a good... Or how did anybody come up with that idea and think it was a good decision? Anyway, sorry to blow up your phone. I didn't mean for this to be so long. I can't stop thinking about how bad this movie was. And I guess I wrote an essay of complaints about it. And then he had one more long one. He wasn't done.
Wow.
He said, also, I wanted to talk to you about how things were done in the comics. In the comics, part of Gamora's soul is trapped in the Soul Stone. This would make sense in the MCU since she was killed in order to obtain the Soul Stone, and Thanos literally sees her soul in the Soul Stone at the end of Infinity War. And Adam Warlock, who is more intelligent and a serious character than Doctor Strange, is uniquely able to navigate the Soul Stone. He is so tied to the Soul Stone that the gem you see on his forehead in the movie is actually the stone itself in the comics. So when James Gunn said the movie would be about getting Gamora back, it makes sense that the main plot would be about finding the Soul Stone and then finding Adam Warlock in order to have him help them get their original version of Gamora out of the Soul Stone. Also, Adam Warlock was made by the High Evolutionary, so it makes sense that they would run into him as a villain on their journey to find Adam Warlock, and that they might uncover Rocket's repressed history in the process. Also, after the events of Infinity War in the comics, Adam Warlock starts a group called the Infinity Watch with the purpose of guarding over the Infinity Stones and making sure nothing like Infinity War ever happens again. This would have been a great way to have the Guardians of the Galaxy disband at the end of the movie because in the comics, Gamora and Drax leave the Guardians to be part of the Infinity Watch. Another member of the Watch is Moondragon, who is Drax's daughter, who turns out to be alive, which would have been a great way to tie up Drax's arch instead of just flooding the movie with kids like they did at the end of Thor 4. The fact that they went with this weird nonsense story with self-indulgent biostations when they had a better story staring them in the face makes me wonder if James Gunn really is a fan of the comics actually at all. Also, the High Evolutionary has a robot face in the comics, so I spent the whole movie expecting them to rip the mask off to reveal a comic-accurate robot face underneath of it. Instead, they actually do rip it off, but it's just to reveal a face of somebody that had their face ripped off. He said, honestly, Dungeons & Dragons was better, Guardians of the Galaxy movie, than the movie Guardians of the Galaxy this year, and Ray-Jean Page's character was an even more accurate Adam Warlock. So
no, I agree. Dungeons and Dragons was better, but
he pretty much just. I mean, I was glad. I wanted him to throw in the comic aspect because I know.
Yeah,
that,
I could argue against some of that too, but
well, go ahead.
I don't agree, like I agree with some of what he's saying, but like stuff like Gamora and Nebula acting out of character. I didn't think they acted out of character at all in this movie, especially with Gamora being a 2014 version. Like, she's not the same Gamora. She's still the earlier Gamora that would have been meaner.
Well, and here's the thing. The only thing that I liked that he pointed out was the fact that there was a sense of her lost. And so in my mind, I'm thinking throughout the movie, you just see, because she's brought back, I guess, after the events of Endgame when they reverse the snap.
Right.
That it's like, okay, she comes back, but she's not completely her full self. And I'll be honest, to me, they kind of sold it in this movie that they were going to try to tie back the relationship between Star-Lord and Gamora, and they were going to have a happy ending.
Mm-hmm.
And
I'm actually glad they didn't. I felt for him to end up with the past version would have been wrong because it's not the same Gamora.
No, but here's
that
the
was
thing.
one aspect I hoped for.
I wasn't expecting him to end up with her. I was expecting her to revert back to who she was before because he was going to bring that out of her. And I thought that would have been a much more fulfilling story for her character arc and for her way to end in this film.
Well, even to me, it would have been better if she, by the end of the film, she does revert back to her old self, but he has since discovered this isn't the Gamora that I fell in love with, and they have to fall in love all over again.
Yeah.
They have to start over. Now they're two completely different people that are meeting and falling for each other again, but we don't know because it ends with them just being friends or on good terms or whatever, which it kind of does. You know, she gives that little smirk and all of that,
right,
which leaves you hopeful, but then he goes back to Earth and, you know,
also
she becomes there
was one last
what's the group
thing
that she's part of? I keep wanting to say Reavers, but that's
the Ravagers.
The Ravagers, yeah.
How they welcome her in with the Sylvester
right.
Stallone's group. Well, I forgot, this was an aesthetic thing, and I actually did agree with him on this, especially because we know Gunn's involvement with, I mean, this is part of why we loved the first Guardians, was the music that he involved in the film, and it was part of the unique take on Gunn's, you know, his direction in general. But he said, also, did you put No Sleep to Brooklyn on your effing soundtrack, dude? One of the most overplayed songs ever. Good thing, because I was starting to miss it since the last time I heard it in a movie, literally 1 month ago, in the other Chris Pratt movie that's still out right now, and we all complained that it was in that movie,
Mario
too.
Brothers? Was it in Mario Brothers?
I don't think it was
they're from Brooklyn.
Oh, maybe. I think it was.
Was it?
I can't remember that, or if it was a cover of it, but I thought it was in. There was another.
I don't remember
No
Sleep to Brooklyn.
It might have been.
I don't know. I was just thinking out loud because they're from Brooklyn, New
and that
York,
was the most recent Chris Pratt.
Right, yeah.
I can't remember.
I just don't remember that in the Mario Brothers either.
He says, hold on. Oh, and don't forget, it was also annoying when it was in the last Spider-Man movie. What a lazy, stupid soundtrack. You wanted to play a Radiohead song, so you picked the one that every person in the world already knows, the one that even Radiohead hates because it gets played too much. Literally any other song might have felt like something, but Creep and Badlands over the credits, seriously, just completely random. I mean, I did agree with that because Creep really turned me off in the beginning, mainly because I just hate that song. But I also agree with him. It's like it's overused, and I hate to say it, but it's like it wasn't just the Creep at the beginning. It was also, I agree with him, Florence and the Machine at the end. And I could see that was his way of kind of coming full circle and being like, well, now I'm sunsetting, and this is a new genre and a new era of music, and we're going to play something a little bit more mainstream and relevant to the last 2 decades.
Yeah.
And it was just like, because we've heard all classic rock songs from him, and like he's always had these classic, you know, songs in his library in these other films. But at the same time, I just kept thinking, I was like, really? Like this is the most un-James Gunn song that I've ever heard played in one of your movies.
Yeah.
And I felt like he just picked it deliberately to be like, see, you didn't think I'd put something like that in there, did you?
It is interesting that Rocket turns the Zune or whatever to the year 2000.
Right.
And I'm like, Peter Quill wasn't on Earth in 2000. He has no idea what year 2000 music even is. He was taken away in the 80s.
They made it sound
but
like
he
at the
didn't,
beginning
the Zune...
that Rocket kind of, and he took over the Zune. Like he kind of, I think,
But the Zune already had music on it when he got the Zune. He didn't put the music on there, so I don't think.
Oh, okay.
he
I thought it was.
specifically
I thought
chose-
all of the music that was on his media player was music he grew up with, and that's why. And,
Well,
and
the Walkman was.
Yeah.
but it
That
got
was the
destroyed
mix
the
tape.
second
Okay,
one, and then
okay.
he was given the. Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
I'll let that slide then.
But ultimately, Keith, you go ahead. I was going to say, to wrap up the Guardians of the Galaxy, we're still sticking with our official review from Keith that it is 3 out of 4 stars.
I
I'm
was
sticking
just
with
gonna-
2.
the
I'm
comic
dropping
stuff,
mine
you
down to
asked me
1.5. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I was just gonna say, as far as the comic stuff went, because I still was gonna talk about that.
Yeah,
if
go
you
ahead.
wanted
Go
me
ahead.
to.
Go ahead.
I just feel like the MCU has been vastly different from the comics in general. I mean, the Soul Stone they put in Vision's forehead in the Infinity Saga, so I knew they weren't going to do that again with Adam Warlock because that would just be redundant.
Well,
But it
the
is
fact that he
there
had the
though.
stone there
It's
at
like
all,
if
though,
you,
was
yeah,
kinda
yeah,
weird.
don't even have it on his forehead
Exactly.
if it's going to be useless.
And as you mentioned in your review, it's like why he could have been completely removed from this movie entirely.
Oh, yeah, he was pointless.
And him and Elizabeth Debicki's
Yep.
character is completely pointless for this film.
I agree the story's better in the comics, but I mean, also to the degree that a lot of that stuff wasn't introduced before the Infinity Saga, so they were like just like Adam Warlock. I think James Gunn hinted at him in the second one with the idea of knowing that what was coming, but then the Russos ultimately chose not to use him because it would be too hard to try to introduce that character on top of everything else that they're culminating. They were going to use the Living Tribunal in the Infinity Saga, which I know you guys don't know who that is, but they came to the conclusion not to use that character specifically because they didn't want to introduce new characters that they would have to spend a lot of time explaining when they're supposed to be wrapping up a saga. So I do get to an extent with where they were at in the Infinity Saga, there's only so much they could pull from the comics that they've already had introduced. Now, as far as this film goes with some of that, I mean, that I get what he's saying about Gamora's soul and the Soul Stone, but they never indicated that that was a possible thing in the movies at all. And that's not really the stones don't work exactly the same way as they did in the comics. In fact, they're called the Infinity Gems in the comics. They're not even called stones. So there's just subtle differences that I feel like I don't expect certain things to be like the comics just because they aren't. I do think they could be better. I do agree with him that there's so many better stories they could pull from.
Yeah, and
that
I
they
think that's where I ultimately agree. Is I wouldn't complain about and in fact, that was kind of the beauty of the Infinity Saga as itself in the first 3 phases was that they made such a nice cohesive story in the world that they built for cinema that it didn't really leave people who were fans of the comics left out in the cold, and it also obviously didn't alienate any newcomers because it joined those forces together to create such a popularity around Marvel. So it's not that the changes I think are what people are upset about. I just think that because now that you're doing changes and the changes are not as good or even near what the comics presented originally, it's almost like, okay, maybe you should just go back to the comics and stick to that story.
I agree with that. I feel like we discussed it when Deadpool first came out and with some other movies. What made Marvel good and Deadpool and other of the successful ones is that even if they didn't match the stories verbatim from the comics, they were true to the characters, like and who the characters are, and to the spirit of the comics. So that when you watch the Infinity War and Endgame movies, no, they don't match the comics very much because they just can't. But into the idea of what the idea of the themes and the characters, they still match. So it works.
Well, there's our full discussion on Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. We've spent a pretty hefty amount of time on this one. I think we did the same with I think most of these. I mean, I want to go back and say Ant-Man or the previous I know Doctor Strange. I mean, we railed on that one for quite a while. I mean, look, we spend a lot of time either criticizing it or it's funny because I think especially when there's a divide between us liking something and disliking it, we're obviously going to expand on those differences. But also this is such a huge franchise that when you come up short or you feel like it's missing something, it doesn't bode well for what else is coming down the road, or especially with James Gunn in this instance, because now he has a very crucial role that he's going to be playing as the head co-head of DC in getting that franchise off the ground and rebooted. So you could say, look, it's a long-winded discussion. I didn't really care that much about Guardians, but hey, I'm glad we got it all out on the table. We're going to stand behind the official review. Obviously, it's the big movie on the block. It probably will be for this week, too. I forget what's coming out. But definitely check it out.
Little Mermaid, I think.
Oh, is that this week?
Or no, that's not this weekend.
That's at the end of May. Because next week is Fast 10, isn't it? Fast 10, I believe, is next week.
I didn't think Fast 10 came out till June, but I could be wrong.
No, it comes out this month.
Yeah, we saw the.
I want to say it was like May 20th
trailer
or May 21st, but I could be wrong.
No, that's because Little Mermaid is May 26th,
which would be the week
Fast
after.
Fast X comes out the 19th,
so that is the week before. So it
comes out May 19th.
Yeah, so that's next week.
So yeah, next weekend. Okay.
And then
I don't know what comes out.
I don't
this
think there
weekend.
is anything this weekend.
I just going to say that I think what's funny is it sounds like we all have a lot of the same issues with Guardians. It's just how much those issues affect our enjoyment of the movie
True.
is where it varies. Because we seem to be griping about the same things. It's just, it's just
it impacted our view
Sean,
of,
I think,
of the overall film, and I agree. It's for me, it was very much Marvel has a really long way to try to win me over. And for me, I'm going in already not. I don't want to say not looking forward to it, but I'm definitely already holding my own bias against any Marvel film.
Been burned. I mean, we've all been burned by Marvel, but I can understand going in it with more criticism,
hesitation.
For sure. Yeah,
and they've got to do a lot to win me over, no doubt.
I think this didn't exceed my expectations; it just met them, and maybe because my expectations aren't high for Marvel as it is why I was satisfied. But I was just like, it met my expectations. It wrap things up, not in the best of ways, but I was entertained throughout all of it, more so than anything else I've seen from Marvel other than No Way Home in the last two phases.
Yeah,
fair enough.
And even No Way Home, I would be honest about, even though I still like it, narratively it's a weak movie. What's great about it is the
nostalgia.
The wrap up of the other Spider-Man characters is giving them a nice
absolutely.
That was the magic in that movie, was those three together.
It was, and we admitted it back then. I mean, it was a lackluster film up until the other Peter Parkers came into the picture, and they did such a great job emotionally of tying them in that it felt, and what they did for the current, Tom Holland Peter Parker. So it's like, that really is the only reason why that film stands above the rest in the newest phase of Marvel, and it's really sad because that's the only reason is that nostalgia trip.
I think that's the only reason it broke $1 billion, whereas none of the other Marvel movies have since Infinity.
And trust me, you don't think Disney is looking at that and thinking, "This isn't good. We got to course correct at some point."
So.
You would hope, yeah. But let's move on to our headlines. Keith, I don't know, are you sticking around for headlines? You're already an hour into the show.
Yeah,
if you're up to it, but. Well, that was,
now he starts coughing.
You're good?
No,
I don't know if I can. I don't know. And the next thing you know, Elden Ring's starting up in the background.
Yeah. No, I'll stick around.
All right, cool.
Let's do it.
Let me go ahead and we'll get into the headlines. Let's roll that open. Got one main headline. It's the title of the show this week. It just happens to be about AI again.
Uh-oh.
We sort of hinted at it last week in the fact that the writer's strike is causing some casualties. There's already been a litany of shows that are, canceled or on indefinite hold. And so we didn't really discuss it too much because we were just covering the fact that it was breaking last week that the strike even happened. However, one major thing is that could this strike potentially push Hollywood to go towards AI writing at an even faster rate, simply because the writers have deemed that this strike is worth upholding until they get their dying wish? And if that's the case, could it now lead to Hollywood saying, all right, fine, stay as long as you'd like, stay out as long as you like. We're going to stick to this as long as it takes.
I think it could. I mean, I think we've talked about this before when AI was kind of at its earliest. We talked about even fast food. We talked about how you can't get anybody to work. It's like eventually if people just they don't want to work and McDonald's or Hardee's or whoever can't get employees, they're just going to replace them with with kiosks, or they're going to replace them. Keith said they got a freaking AI working at the Hardee's on Dixie Highway. Like, I mean, that's not an AI in the window waving at you, but it takes your order and gets it right.
Well,
according
Keith, I was
to him.
gonna say, didn't you say it was a good experience?
It's magnificent. I mean,
It's better than people.
Here's the funny thing, because not even if you can't get people to work, but when you have people who are taking orders and they're demanding, $20 an hour, it's like, sorry, punching in somebody's order isn't a $20 an hour job. So we're not going to pay you, and if you refuse to work for anything less, we're going to replace you with an AI that can listen to this person's order, punch, and automatically enter the computer.
Once the
without
AI is
error.
paid for, it doesn't need a salary.
No,
it doesn't need an hourly wage. You pay $4,500 or whatever the stupid thing costs, and then that's it. It's like,
and here's the funny thing,
and it doesn't fall asleep
what
at the window.
I'm going to tell you this.
or get your order wrong.
I've used it more than once, but here's my absolute, what I think is hilarious to highlight the AI. We got an order, me and my sister and everybody got the food home, and there were a couple things missing. And what's hilarious is we look at the receipt, and the receipt verbatim, even when we asked, add this sauce or do this, every item is listed perfectly on the receipt. So what happened was the AI put the order in correctly, and whoever made the food still messed up and didn't put it in the bag.
The human fulfilled the order wrong.
So I'm like, so this is what's sad, is that the AI is now doing your job better, and you still mess up because you can't read.
Well,
literally, all you had to do was read the order.
No, wait, did the AI write the order out in ones and zeros? Because we can't read that. Maybe
it was all in binary.
Maybe, it was in binary.
But it's funny because you just proved, though, why the people who are arguing for more pay, it's like you can't even do your job right when you're getting more pay, let alone an AI.
Well, hell,
it's like
even you have issues with the writing in this Guardians of the Galaxy 3. It's like,
absolutely.
dude, if you all can't get together and write a decent movie, then we'll get a computer to do it.
And I was going to read. First, I want to kind of break down some of the effects of the writer strike so far. Just some of the things that have already come out about it. Netflix suspending overall deals. Daredevil, Billions, Severance, Evil, Stranger Things, Game of Thrones spinoff, Good Trouble, and more are latest shows that are affected by the writer's strike. Sinking Spring was a production for Apple TV. That series has been halted due to the strike. Freeform's Good Trouble halts production due to the WGA picketing. SNL alums Tina Fey and Seth Meyers, Fred Armisen are joining on the picket lines. We've seen celebrities down there. Tom Hanks, Guillermo del Toro, Christopher Nolan was out on the picket lines holding up signs.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's kind of incredible because you do understand what's at stake, and you've got certain groups of people that are obviously standing behind them that I don't think is any surprise. But it still is, when it comes to the ultimate end goal of whether or not these writers get their way, it's like, okay, I don't. It's not the actors or the people that work alongside these. I mean, they're part of unions too. I expect them to stick up for these other unions. But I wanted to read the article that we do link to. It's called from AboveTheLine.com. And it says, for weeks, multiple studios and streamers have been planning to use AI to generate scripts based on books and other IP that is in the public domain, with lists of titles making the rounds among development executives. Multiple insiders have told Above the Line. I'm reliably told that nearly every studio has already explored this possibility, and that should those plans come to fruition over the weeks and likely months to come, the studios plan to hire writers to rewrite those scripts once the writer's strike is over. That is, of course, a major sticking point in these negotiations, as the WGA is insistent that AI not be used to create any literary material whatsoever. In case you haven't been paying attention, the headlines of the last few days, AI has seemingly become the defining issue of this strike. At the very profession of film and television writing is at stake, and the future of the guild itself. While I'm firmly on the writer's side here and believe that AI will never be capable of writing a truly great movie like Social Network, or even a very good one, and it can aid a writer and also provide a framework that the writer can tweak and put their own stamp of humanity on, thereby speeding up the development process and saving the studio some shekels, since it won't have to pay writers to start from scratch, which is precisely why the guild is pushing back. The writers are simply defending what little turf they have left, and I understand why the Guild is fighting tooth and nail against this, but I can also see the studio's perspective. Folks on the studio side suggest that writers should not fear AI, but rather embrace it, as its usage is inevitable, and there are those, i.e. Joe Russo, who believe it can be a wonderful tool, both for writing and actual filmmaking. The fear surrounding AI is certainly understandable, as it is with any technology that is considered disruptive. To its supporters, though, it's all about how you use it. Studios can use AI to replace writers and help them improve their work. And let's face it, there is room for improvement these days. How might it do to the latter? It could deepen fan engagement or identify things that fans want to see that a writer would then, write. With proper training, AI can be another tool in a writer's toolkit. On the other hand, you've got folks like Jeffrey Hinton, the so-called godfather of AI, who just left his job at Google, which is developing an AI chatbot called Bard, so he could more freely speak about the dangers of the technology he helped create. I do think AI should remain an open conversation as opposed to a closed one. As change happens too fast in Hollywood these days for things to be closed off, AI still needs to be fed prompts and asked the right questions. So perhaps those will become the job of a writer going forward as opposed to an exec. So let's talk about that a little bit. In terms specifically when he's bringing up the process of maybe AI providing for up-and-coming writers the ability to kind of hone their craft and hone their skill so they're not starting from ground zero or maybe taking years of observing other industry standard writers who are just, who have become huge successes. Well, could that not be one benefit to this?
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think it's like the article mentions not just up and coming writers. Generally, it's like it creates a kind of a bones for any writer to doctor up. And I see the benefit there. I agree. I don't think AI could write a Saving Private Ryan or a Return of the King. It's going to write something generic, and then a writer would need to be would have to step in to doctor it up and make it better. Now, I do see both sides of this because I don't think AI, you can't just use an AI script. I do think it would come out generic and we would just have nothing but MCU Phase 4 movies.
Yeah. Well, they probably could have done better than what we've got so far.
It can't write a Return of the King, but it can write a Rings of Power.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely.
100%.
Absolutely. I think that. And that's where they would need a writer to doctor it up and make it better. But at that point, I kind of feel like the writer, too, where it's like, well, why do I want to doctor this up when I could just make something better to begin with? And I know they'll say, well, you can use it as a tool to help give ideas or to springboard off of, or, it's a starting point. But some of the best ideas come from the creative process of starting out too, when you're brainstorming and creating things, or you make a first draft and then you edit it. And I know the AI would ideally be like your rough draft and then you would go to town on that. But I don't know. I just feel like you lose some soul there that could be on display. I would have to think that AI would have to get a lot better before I would think it feasible, and it could in the future. I just right now don't see it turning out scripts that I think are going to be
I think it's
anything
funny,
more than just
because like he says there too, it's like the good writers, the ones who are held as the greats, or they are getting script deals like a Sorkin, or even I guess you could say Russo, or even the Duffer Brothers from Stranger Things. It's like it's interesting because it's going to be pulling from. Objectively, Hollywood is going to have a standard of those being good writers. The internet's going to be filled with scripts or treatments from these perfect or wonderful scripts or wonderful movies. And so you're going to have an AI that is basing a lot of its material off of these writers' works. So it's kind of funny in an interesting way of it being a copyright problem where it's like, well, if you create too similar a work, and, is there a way for us to create AI where you can track its sources that it's pulling certain things? Or is it going to be one of those things that becomes a hodgepodge of, well, you can pull 10 things from this script, but after it gets to the 11th, it's now copyright infringement. That's kind of the level of critiquing that I think we're going to get into the weeds when it comes to how robust AI, becomes in the future. But right now, I agree. It's like I don't think anybody's arguing that it's going to write Citizen Kane, But if it pumps out something that, or to use your analogy, Sean, it pumps out rings of power, and then you have someone come along and they make it similar to a Return of the King.
Yeah.
I don't think, look, again, I'm not trying to compare Tolkien to an AI.
Yeah.
But the problem with AI is it continues to progressively get more and more robust. I mean,
advanced.
Advanced.
Yeah.
It
Quickly.
continues to learn rapidly.
Yeah, very quick. Yeah.
And so I think that's the scary nature here is while we're saying it can't write a Return of the King, we're just saying it yet.
It frustrates me.
I don't think it ever will be able to, in my opinion. I think it'll always have some type of generic, like it'll always have. I mean, I liken it to even to an extent, like I prefer reading physical books over an iPad because the touch and smell of a book leaves a lasting memory that impacts. Like if I read something physical, I remember it better than reading something digital because there's no sensory memory added there. And I feel like an AI is not going to have the depth. It'll get something close, but I just don't imagine that it can ever be anything that's not just slightly above generic. But I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's like we talked about last time we discussed this. It doesn't have any soul.
Right.
It doesn't have that human touch.
Yeah. Well, you're right. And again, all of its material, however, good it is at parsing out what is quote unquote acceptable versus what's great example of good writing. Again, all of that is based on prompts that a human has engineered. Mm-hmm. Now, granted, the scary thing will become just like we carry smartphones in our pockets. And no, I wouldn't fundamentally say that smartphones have replaced human interactions. It's no doubt completely changed how we interact. And to a degree, is that change and over multiple generations and iterations so dire to humanity as a whole that it becomes detrimental to where we no longer are influencing AI? Like, I don't think this is within our lifetime, but I do think with the rapid pace of technology and AI and how fast it learns and how advanced it gets, the problem becomes how quickly do we depend on it to influence our subjectivity to where we look to AI and say, all right, this is now something that I'm going to see as inherently good because the AI told me so.
Yeah, no, I agree because I think even modern. So I was just saying, I think modern technology, I think it's no coincidence that if you look at the rapid acceleration of how technology is advanced and also the rapid acceleration of depravity in the culture, because when everything's, and I'm not saying the internet's bad or technology's bad, I think it's a good. But when you see how everything's so accessible and people get online and the spread of misinformation, I don't think it's a coincidence that the culture has become so corrupt at the same time that technology continues to advance.
Well, it's like anything. It's a tool, but it's just how you use the tool.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't think we should get rid of technology. It's just we have to be cautious because we already know people are going to use it for ill means.
Well, go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, I think we keep talking about how AI is going to be, 10 years, 5 years, even maybe 50 years down the road, like you said, not even in our lifetime, focusing back on what the writer's issues are with AI. I kind of like, I was going to say earlier, it frustrates me that they're going on strike, worrying that AI is going to replace them. But it's like, dude, if you're not doing your job, if you're standing on a picket line and not writing, then AI is going to replace you. Like, you striking is just making it, like the article said, it's furthering them towards, pushing them more towards AI. And that's where I'm just kind of like, at some point, I went through a whole thing with this with the NHL. I used to be a huge NHL fan. When NHL went on strike because they weren't making enough freaking money, they're making $25 million. That's not enough. Well, then I quit watching the NHL. I stopped supporting the NHL. I stopped buying their jerseys. I stopped watching them on TV. Like, I didn't go to the games. Like, I quit. If you can't, when's enough is enough? Like, if these writers think that they're getting a raw deal in some shape or form, go to it and approach it the right way. Ask for more if you deserve more. But if you're on the picket line and you're not working and you're not doing the job that they want you to do, then I kind of feel like you deserve to be replaced by an AI. Now, I understand the AI is not going to be able to create what you can create, not at this point, like you said, maybe someday.
Right.
But the more you continually ask for more, just like with any workplace, if your employee is constantly coming to you every year or two and asking for more money and asking for more this and more that, but you're not producing the goods that
Right.
merit that raise, then so be it.
And it's funny and I'm glad you're bringing that up, because I was talking to someone else about this earlier today, about how I liken it to a really fancy restaurant versus fast food. And the fact of the matter is there's been no question in mind that because of the rise of streaming services and how much, content is pushed upon you in all sorts of mediums, I mean, whether it is books or television or movies or video games, there's all these ways in which these things are trying to get your attention. They're trying to get you to consume their product, so they get more eyeballs, they get more ad revenue and more dollars, more money in their pocket. And again, even like it says, maybe AI starts to generate more of what it is that the so-called people want, when really it just ends up becoming like what Marvel has become, in the sad sake of we're just trying to pump out this stuff of just everybody loves Marvel, we're going to give you more Marvel.
Yeah.
Same with Star Wars right now. We've been highly critical of Disney and the franchises because they've just been constantly putting out schlock without really digging in deep and coming up with these very creative extensions of the stories we love. And it's like, for me, you have a beast that has been created with streaming services and with these consumers who are saying, I'm paying the subscription, I want to be fed. The difference is you have that option now. It's like, okay, well, all we can provide to you is the fast food lane. We can give you this cheap produced stuff that you're going to want to consume, and because you're just looking for the next big cultural phenomenon or the next thing to watch that's popular, you're going to consume it. And that's what it's going to cost. It's going to be this over here. It's this AI-generated script. We got it pretty much worked out. We got another producer over here who's kind of worked through it and said, this is a little weird and wonky. We're going to fix it here. But ultimately, it'll suffice. And then you have on the other end the Jeff Ruby Steakhouse, where I'm going to go and I'm going to pay the $40 for a freaking awesome steak that's cooked exactly how I like it to perfection, and it's worth this premium tier price. And I think you're kind of seeing now this writer's strike exacerbating that. I think the fact is you can't sit here and tell me that with all of these people who are coming to consume this content and all these avenues now to present it, it's like they got to fill the coffers. And so we've been willing to put up with these kind of mediocre writers, and Hollywood has been like, we need to hire more. We need to put out more content. We need to get more butts in seats to write stuff. And the writers are like, we're burned out. We can't do anymore. Like, you gotta compensate us better. And they're like, okay, well, let's find a happy medium. And here they are with this, this list of, hey, these are our demands. And they're saying, okay, well, that doesn't really fit within our books right now. We can't meet that, but we still got to produce content. We got to get it out there. Okay, well, in the meantime, what are we going to turn to? And it's like on both ends, I see both ends of the spectrum, the studio side as well as the writer side. But at the end of the day, I think you're still going to have the marketplace decide what is going to go forward. And I think you're going to see a scary age of terrible AI-generated, whether it's scripts, whether it's actual AI-generated imagery, like the scary cartoons that we've been
music. One of our viewers said AI music just sucks. Like it's if you've heard any, it's
who
Michael Werner.
Oh, okay.
I mean, the AI music that I've heard it's a disturbing jumbled mess. I mean, it's like go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I agree. The fake trailers are a jumbled mess. Yeah, go ahead.
But the thing is we all know that, again, with this being a primitive technology, is it something that we're willing to pay money for and consume? Absolutely not. But is it something that, as long as the current stuff that is streaming can hold over our appetite for a while, and they can, again, the more they depend on this technology, the more it's used, the more refined it gets, the scarier it gets closer to creating something that we do consume, and we're thinking, that's not half bad. That's getting to something that I do like. That's all they're looking for. Yeah. That's all they're looking for, because that's the same reason they create the subpar crap of the series that we criticize, whether it be the next Disney franchise or whether the next Marvel movie that comes out that's subpar. We could sit here and talk about how much we dislike it. Yeah. And yeah, they're going to see a bottom dollar sign and say, well, it's not making $1 billion. This is a problem because that's what we're used to. But at least if we're still making a profit and we know people are still showing up to see it, that's all we do care about.
Yeah. That's another frustrating side to it is the greed. I mean, as somebody that used to be a photography enthusiast, I remember when Photoshop was at its infancy. I remember thinking to myself, now wait a minute, now they've got this new AI replace technology in Photoshop CS3 or 4, and it's like you take a picture, you got this beautiful picture, but there's a power line in it, and it's like, oh crap, well, I can just use AI to knock that power line right out of there. And I remember thinking to myself, that's bullcrap. That's cheating. You've removed the art form of getting the right angle, waiting to the right time of night to where you can't see that power line because it's dark, or moving to a different position and getting the shot without the power line in it. Like that, that's the art form. That's what goes into making a great photo. You want to be on the cover of National Geographic, you're not going to do it with Photoshop. And that's the kind of thing that I used to, but then I found myself using it and thinking, damn, this is powerful. This is awesome. You cannot tell that there was ever a power line there.
Well,
but then the luster of the photography wore off.
But then it's weird because I liken that to movies and CGI. But we've seen the movies where they use it to an excessive degree to where it taints the taste of the film to an overall extent. They depend on it too much.
That's my point.
But then there's other films where, I mean, think of Dune and how many visual effects shots there are in Dune, but how amazing that looked in theaters.
Yeah.
And how they created a world that was obviously otherworldly. It was something we hadn't seen, but it felt so real. Yeah. And that's when visual effects and CGI is done correctly. I mean, and I think that's kind of where I mean, I think it's like any scary new technology, and you do have to try to bring yourself back down to earth and have some levity as to these are the new frontiers and there's going to be rocky starts. But if you can marry this beautiful symmetry of, okay, it's like I said, it's like with any great tool, how you manage it and how it comes to be a tool in your toolkit as opposed to your crutch that you rely on to get you through something. That's where I think most people are going to... I mean, I ultimately then agree with you, Keith, in the fact that, I don't think a Return of the King is going to be created entirely by AI. I think what's still out there in the ether and the unknown is AI is such an, it's not like the internet before people even understood or knew what the internet was. This is literally something that we're creating that grows and learns on its own, creates a shared database on its own. And eventually, like I said, the scary nature of AI is to what degree it can start to influence as opposed to be influenced. And that's where I think the scary, I don't think it's going to be within my lifetime, but I think as generations continue and they become more integrated into society to the point where it, like you said, it's just that little dabble of, all right, well, I'll take the power line out of this scene. But then it becomes, well, how do I frame it such that I can maybe add something to this scene and make it something unique and creative?
Yeah. I mean,
it's funny
it can be a tool of your craft,
right.
But if it shapes you, I mean, if it becomes your craft, then I think that's when you've not only have you cheapened the craft itself, and you've cheapened the end result, the product. It's like Hollywood touts, they get up for one night a year and tout filmmaking and all of the process and all this stuff, and they're the first ones to say, oh, we're trying to just stay true to the craft of filmmaking. But if you're if you get to a point where AI is doing it all for you, then you're not a filmmaker anymore. You're someone who just lets AI spit out what it can and you just fix it. But the creator is the AI now. If AI is assisting you in your creation, that's one thing. But if you're assisting the AI in its creation, you've lost it.
I agree, but to play devil's advocate a little bit, because I do think it's funny that every generation kind of has its advance in technology when it comes to certain things. And with filmmaking, you had when the invention of sound in film, and they were like, oh, this is going to ruin cinema. Like, why do you need to be able to hear what they're saying? And then you had color, and then you had, film to digital. I mentioned earlier today watching the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man in 4K HDR was gorgeous. I love the look of actual film when it's up-res, when it's actually done right like that over digital, because digital's so clean. But that doesn't mean using a digital camera is bad. I still love tons of, most modern films are now shot digitally. And then you can just, with the CGI example, it's like a lot of people, like when they started going from 2D animation to like Pixar, were like, well, now you're not actually animating, you're just using a computer, so you take away the crap. So to an extent, I could see why people would say, oh, well, AI is just another tool that we can use. But then I do still see the fear of, just like with them arguing with, well, CGI is not really animation anymore, but it is still, like, you still have to have somebody that
There's still somebody
is skilled
digitally
enough.
animating
Yes.
it. Like, it's still...
And that is different from AI, where it's just pulling from everything it can find, like all the sources it can find to make something that's solely based. Like, it's only ever going to be solely based on whatever sources the AI can pull from.
And ultimately, and even when it becomes quote unquote self-aware, I still agree with Sean in the sense that I do think there's going to be, just like with in the way of human interaction and talking to somebody in person is different than texting them. It's far more convenient, and sometimes it's far more useful to be able to reach someone immediately through text, but it does not have the same, or even FaceTime. I'll liken it to that because it's more similar. But there is still there is such a level of separation in terms of the actual interaction you get with somebody in person versus over FaceTime. And you can't simulate that to that degree. I mean, even with people who are talking about VR or augmented reality and being able to add physical touch to certain aspects. I mean, again, there's all sorts of ways people are innovating to try to, expand that toolkit of technology. Mm-hmm. But I still think that when it comes to even something as scary as AI can be, the human level interaction at which, again, it's ultimately up to us as a society and as a culture to pursue what I think is really at the heart of these interactions, which is that soul level connection that we all share. And when you completely sever that tie and you remove yourself from it, again, time will tell. The more people depend on it, the more reluctant or the more relied upon they become on it. And then you have the very few who are reluctant. I mean, I think of social media. It's like, it's a great tool, but even now with so many people who have been involved on it, or who have been involved in it since its inception, now are to the point of saying, you know what, I have it, but I'm going to walk away from it. I'm going to put it down. I'm going to set it aside. I'm willingly taking forward action of saying, this is not going to be this important, piece of technology that my entire life is going to revolve around. Yeah. I have to, again, the quote nowadays that people go out and touch some grass. It's like, it's like, get back to reality. Yeah. And yep. So much of the divides that we have societally and culturally is because we've become dependent on these tools to be the intermediary of what we really can't replace with actual human interaction. And I think it's the same way with AI. I mean,
that's good. I like that.
I think, but it goes back to
say we as humans, we have a tendency to kind of get wrapped up in things that make us out of touch, but then we also, I don't know how, maybe it's God. Maybe
I think it's through God.
Somehow or another we find our way back. I mean,
because I don't think you can replicate that spiritual and interaction that you get with God.
People thousands of years ago in the Bible, they walked away from God countless times, but they always came back. I mean, He drew them back, but they came back.
Right.
And I think, but and this is, I'm not trying to get spiritual, but it's similar. I feel like the thing you said about social media really kind of brought that to my attention. Is like, we got wrapped up in it for a decade, and because it's been about 10 or 15 years since the social media really became huge, and it's like, we get wrapped up in it, but now more than ever, you're seeing people walk away from it,
or
or
at
put
least
down their phones,
understand
or
the
set
damages.
parameters. It's like,
or at least start to understand the ramifications of using
we're
it.
realizing that we're disconnected. It's
Yeah.
like instead of texting your mom on her birthday, you call her,
Right.
or you go over there.
Yeah, you actually see her.
That's what I'm saying. There's a difference, and we're realizing that, and maybe AI will be another one of those things. We'll dive headfirst into it, and we'll get so freaking deep, but then we'll realize, well, we're no longer making film. We're no longer producing art. We're letting the AI do it, and we'll step back.
I think when the newness wears off, like with social media, I mean, it was amazing. Like MySpace, was incredible. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. And then Facebook came along and Twitter. But then after a while, when the newness wears off and you get tired of being disconnected from other people, and you realize, well, all I'm really doing is just posting, the highlights of my life, but I'm not actually really living a life. I'm just
again, it's
I've gotten to the point, like, I'm just I'm laughing because I'm thinking about Alexa. All right, I hope you don't have one of those in your house, because I just woke her up. But like literally, when those things came out, like when Amazon introduced that, or the I'm not going to say her name because then my phone will start talking to me. But you say their name and you wake them up and you ask them, hey, Alexa, what's the weather? What's the weather going to be like today? And it's like, that was so cool when that first came out. Dude, I'm telling you, in the morning I wake up and I'm like, Alexa, what's the weather going to be like today? And she'll say, today it's going to be sharp and sunny. I'm like, shut the hell up, Alexa. Like, I just start yelling at her sometimes. And I'm like, you're not real. You're not a real person. Yep. And I'm just like, you're lying. You're lying. It's not going to rain today. Like, I've gotten to where I hate it. I use it. I ask her the question, but
you're not acting it.
Then I cuss her out. I'm like, I'm tired of her.
I was just gonna say, I can relate. I can relate because I hate my Alexa.
Yeah.
I use it to listen. Like I'll use it to listen to podcasts or music when I'm doing chores around the house or.
It's a
whatever.
woman I can yell at. That's not my wife. It's like I can't yell at my wife like that or cuss my wife out like that. But I can ask Alexa what's the weather going to be today, or whatever, and I can yell at the thing and she doesn't talk back.
I think my problem is just that because they are always listening, and if you accidentally, you don't even have to say Alexa or iPhone. Like, I don't want to say mine either, but it's like you just say something similar. Like, I mean, we've had situations with our phone or our watches when you just say something similar.
But it used to be a novel thing. It used to be so cool that would happen. It's like, oh, look, Siri's talking to us now, and now you're just like shut up, stop. Yeah, exactly. The newness is worn off.
Well, my parents do the exact same thing. They have an Alexa. They use it all the time for reminders, and there will be times where it'll randomly think it heard the trigger word, and then the next thing you know, they're sitting there and it finally they just ignore it, and it finally goes off, and they're like, yeah, she's got a mind of her own.
No, it does. I swear to God, if mine tells me to replace my HVAC filter again, I'm going to throw it out the window. And I've turned off the notifications for that, but she still pops up once a month and says, hey, this is just a reminder. Your HVAC filter needs to be replaced. And
actually, that's a great idea. I forget mine all the time. Maybe I need to set an Alexa reminder.
See, I just
all right,
made
Sean,
you dive deeper.
When you get the
I'll throw it over to your house.
Send it to Keith. Yeah. All righty, guys. We got real quick. I'm glad I went with this topic for our Vices segment. Trust me, it's going to be so quick.
All right, let's do it.
You're not even going to know. Hold on.
That sounded like it was AI generated.
It wasn't. Straight from my mouth. My vocal cords. My vocal cords are not that.
Your vocal cords.
Oh, Keith sounds AI generated.
Yeah, his vocal cords are broke right now. It's like,
all right, real quick.
I'm changing my HVAC filter.
The things you can do at home when you're called into the podcast. A fruit you can't get enough of. I swear it's the Vices topic.
Okay.
What?
A fruit. Okay. A fruit you can't get enough
Watermelon.
of. Oh my gosh.
You.
There it is. I knew somebody was going to be cheeky.
Fruit, not fruit cake.
Come on. I miss fruit cake.
Fruit. I don't know.
Watermelon's mine. Watermelon was mine.
Dude, you can only get it for like 4 months out of the year.
I know, and it's so freaking delicious.
I know.
And you just keep eating
I eat it till I get diarrhea, dude.
Another one, I'll go with a different one. Although sometimes I get tired of it, is bananas.
Nah, I don't like bananas.
I like bananas. I like apples and peaches
and bananas.
and strawberries.
Apples and bananas.
Apples.
Peaches.
Strawberries.
Strawberries?
I could eat a peach for hours.
I bet you could. Nicolas Cage.
I could eat a peach for hours.
Face off.
So what was you said strawberries, peaches, and it was
apples.
Apples.
I love some apples.
I do like apples, but they're not my favorite. Watermelons.
I like apples.
Yeah.
Watermelon is mine. I can't get enough watermelon.
Yep.
Alrighty, that was our Vices segment. Real quick, short and sweet.
Wow.
Hey, I like that.
Told you, it was
Short and sweet.
It was
Just
easy.
like watermelon.
Hey, there you go. Easy peasy.
Just like fruit.
Lemon squeezy. I don't like lemons. Alrighty, guys, that's gonna do it for this episode. Keith, you hung in the whole time.
I did.
And even though I know your voice is a little raspy from being sick,
Oh man, I
do
can
you
try it.
do you think
I'll
you
do
could
it.
do
I'm
it?
not doing it. You have to do it.
You have to. It's your
I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
your sign off. Go ahead. What's our email?
You're talking about the email, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Hold on. I might have to cough real quick.
He's gotta clear his throat.
You can email us at rmPodcast@redmoonproductions.com.
Nah, there ain't no AI that can fake
Nah.
that. I'm telling
We
you.
need you here in person.
It's even better in person, but no,
Yeah.
AI can't generate that.
Nope.
That was beautiful. That's right, RMPodcast@redmoonproductions.com. And as always, you can like, share, subscribe on all of our social media accounts, Red Moon Book, Red Moon Tweet, Red Moon Pics, and search for Red Moon Productions on YouTube or Rumble, either one. Again, we're going to be live probably later in the year on Rumble, or we're trying to work on some things behind the scenes. But thank you all so much for tuning in. Keith, thank you for calling in. I know you probably. I'm glad you started feeling better at the beginning of the show. Hopefully you get better.
Yeah.
Hated that you were out this week, but hopefully, your sickness wanes here.
Yeah, my sickness.
Yep. Because as soon as I start
Funny
this
you
music,
say.
oh what? Go ahead.
I thought it's funny that you said no way I could do my voice, because I base a little bit of my voice on Peter Cullen, who is the original Optimus Prime voice actor.
But that's not an AI generated voice. That's a voice actor.
Yeah, I'm just saying that
Base it off Optimus Prime.
But Optimus Prime was an AI.
I guess he was a robot.
He was.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
I do like Peter Cullen with a little bit of a Western country thing. I don't know.
That's
It's
beautiful.
Autobots.
That's what I go
roll
for.
out.
Can you say put the cube into my chest?
Place the cube into my chest.
Even over the phone, it's so good. Alrighty, guys, that's
It's a
gonna do it
terrible
for
line.
this episode. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Hopefully, Keith will be back with us next week, and he'll be all healed up. Until next time. By the way, Keith, as soon as his music starts, I'm muting you. Okay?
Okay.
No, actually, no. I'm gonna let you sign off. I'm gonna let you sign off, and then I'll mute you.
Okay.
All right. Until next time, I'm one of your hosts, Brandon Davidson, alongside our normal new host,
Sean Sebastian.
and
Mustard Love.
there it is.
Ooh.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode. For more reviews, previous podcast shows, and everything Red Moon, visit our website, redmoonproductions.com. You can also like us on Facebook or follow us on Twitter by searching for Red Moon Productions, LLC. We'll see you at the movies.